How can one state, a member of this august body, act with such impunity against defenseless men, women, and children? Surely, the hottest part of hell is reserved for those perpetrators of genocide and those who are complicit in it.
There cannot be business as usual in the face of genocide. As Navi Pillar has made clear, to do nothing is not neutrality, it is complicity. But no crime, however heinous, can justify genocide. We also need to recognize the crimes being perpetrated in the West Bank, the scale and pace of appropriation of Palestinian land by illegal Israeli settlers, the open backing this receives from the Israeli government, the harassment, imprisonment, and abuse of the Palestinian population, the withholding of tax revenues from the Palestinian Authority. It must not be allowed to continue.
These atrocities must stop now. We cannot allow the further killing of thousands of innocent people, babies, children, youth, the elderly, and the frail to continue and turn our heads the other way because of improper consideration.
And as it relates to Gaza, yes, there must be a release of the hostages taken on October 7th. But we have now gone to a point where all of our human sensibilities are offended by the continuous and disproportionate attacks on the Palestinian people and the failure to allow access by the international community to the survivors for the provision of humanitarian aid.
Your Excellencies, the raging genocide and neocolonial oppression being committed against the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank before our very eyes on global television and are continuing affronts to the elemental rights of the Palestinians, to civilized conduct, and to international law. How can one state, a member of this august body, act with such impunity against defenseless men, women, and children? Surely, the hottest part of hell is reserved for those perpetrators of genocide and those who are complicit in it. Over 200 years ago, the British committed large-scale genocide against the indigenous people of my country. And we are still suffering, enduring the historical legacies of underdevelopment therefrom. Similarly, the genocidal enslavement of African bodies in our Caribbean, in our hemisphere. It will take centuries for the pain, suffering, and legacies of the current genocide of the Palestinians to be repaired. We in the Caribbean are today demanding justly reparations for native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies, which occurred centuries ago. This tragedy, this madness that has been unfolding unabated in Palestine must stop. Israel's recent expansion of this war against the Palestinian nation in the state of Qatar is unacceptable. We stand in solidarity with Qatar.
President, I come now to Gaza, a catastrophe of the most monumental and consequential kind. It is not possible to describe the scale of the physical and psychological suffering endured by the Palestinian people for 2 long and brutal years. Ireland stands in full solidarity with them. We acknowledge those who have worked in the most unimaginably difficult circumstances to preserve and sustain life, to treat the injured, to prevent the displacement and destruction of a people and their rich and irreplaceable cultural heritage. At the heart of this vital effort have been UN agencies and workers, most especially UNRWA. And we remember those among them who have lost their lives. And we pay tribute to the extraordinary bravery of the medics. We honour the journalists who have worked tirelessly and without regard to their own safety to ensure that nobody can ever say, we did not know. What is happening in Gaza cannot be justified or defended. It is an affront to human dignity and decency. It is an abandonment of all norms, all international rules and law. We are witnessing hunger being used as an instrument of war. Babies starving to death while aid rots at the border. People shot while desperately seeking food for their families. The deliberate targeting and destruction of schools, hospitals, mosques, cultural institutions. The killing of doctors, aid workers, journalists. Dislocation and displacement over and over. We are all witnesses to the immense wrath of one of the world's most modern and best equipped armies brought to bear on a trapped and defenseless civilian population. Last week, the Independent International Commission on the Occupied Territories called it out for what it is. Having examined carefully Israel's conduct of the war since 2023, as well as the actions and statements of senior Israeli military and political figures, it concluded that Israel is responsible for the commission of genocide in Gaza. Genocide, the gravest of crimes in international law. All signatories of the Convention on Genocide are obliged to act to prevent and to punish it. We cannot say we were not aware. In January of last year, the ICJ put all states on notice of the plausibility of the State of Israel committing genocide in its military operations in Gaza. And the court has been clear. Where state parties are able to contribute to the prevention of genocide, they are obliged to employ all means reasonably available to them so as to prevent genocide as far as possible. As Navi Pilar, chair of the Independent Commission, said last week, the prevention of genocide is not a matter of discretion of states. It is a legal and moral obligation, and it admits no delay. All members of this United Nations must reflect on what more they can do. And I especially call on those who have influence to use it urgently to maximum effect. I call on those who have provided and who continue to provide Israel with the means necessary to prosecute its war to reflect carefully on the implications of their actions and the consequences for the Palestinian people. There cannot be business as usual in the face of genocide. As Navi Pilar has made clear, to do nothing is not neutrality, it is complicity. Ireland has intervened in the South African case at the ICJ. We have recognized the state of Palestine. We are legislating against the import of goods from the occupied territories. We will act to prevent those members of the government of Israel who have been instrumental in fomenting the unfolding disaster in Gaza from entering our country. We will continue to work with like-minded partners across the world to bring this human catastrophe to an end. There must be an immediate ceasefire, the release of all remaining hostages, and unimpeded access for humanitarian and aid workers to Gaza. Those responsible for war crimes must be held accountable. There can be no impunity. We also need to hold to account those responsible for the attack on Israel of the 7th of October 2023. That too was a monstrous war crime. I appreciate the profound and continuing impact the trauma has had on the people of Israel. Hamas, not the Palestinian people, were responsible. Hamas must answer for its crimes. Hamas can have no role in the future governance in Palestine. But no crime, however heinous, can justify genocide. We also need to recognize the crimes being perpetrated in the West Bank, the scale and pace of appropriation of Palestinian land by illegal Israeli settlers, the open backing this receives from the Israeli government, the harassment, imprisonment and abuse of the Palestinian population, the withholding of tax revenues from the Palestinian Authority. It must not be allowed to continue. In its advisory opinion published in July 2024, the ICJ was clear that all states are under an obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, and not to render aid or assistance in maintaining the Palestinian territory. The world knows what drives this illegal activity is a determination to render the possibility of a two-state solution impossible. It must not succeed. A two-state solution remains the only prospect for a peaceful future in which the people of Israel and the people of Palestine can live in peace and security side by side. I welcome the decision to recognize the state of Palestine taken by France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and others. I commend France and Saudi Arabia for the leadership they are providing in working towards a political process that can deliver a just, lasting peace and security in the region.
Must there be an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza? The suffering of so many thousands of innocent civilians must come to an end now. It must come to an end now. Yes, the remaining hostages must be released immediately by Hamas. International humanitarian aid must be allowed to flow in Gaza without impediment. It is so morally wrong and inhuman that so many innocent people are dying of hunger. These atrocities must stop now. We cannot allow the further killing of thousands of innocent people, babies, children, youth, the elderly, and the frail to continue and turn our heads the other way because of improper considerations. We cannot remain silent. Decisive and effective action needs to be taken without any further delay. I cannot bear to see anymore the physical and psychological pain and suffering in the eyes of the young children we bring over to Malta from Gaza to give them a better future. Children, young children with mutilated bodies who are supposed to be celebrating the innocence of their youth and the best period of their lives. The parents who have lost their young children. And I ask, why? When leadership should be about humanity and empathy, and not about who can inflict maximum damage to win a war or wipe out a nation or its people. I was proud this week to stand with other world leaders and add Malta to the growing list of allies recognizing Palestinian statehood. After tens of years of discussion in Malta, we took decisive action and did the right thing to do. I owe this to Ibrahim, a 15-year-old icon of the resilience and strength of the Palestinian people. Ibrahim is now receiving the best medical care and prosthetics in Malta after having both his legs blown off and severely injured by a missile fired from a drone in Gaza. His friends were killed in the same accident. These are the daily realities in Gaza, and we have to stand up and be counted. Not doing so would mean that we are complicit in what is happening. Now, a viable two-state solution, no, isn't a reward for Hamas. It is the exact opposite. It is the only way, in actual fact, to finally banish the evil of Hamas. It is the only solution that can deliver the sustainable and peaceful future that both peoples wish for and deserve. Of course, the road to a fair two-state solution is a long one, fraught with difficulties. But just because something is hard doesn't mean it is impossible. The world owes to Israelis and Palestinians alike to pursue this path to peace.
The world must not ignore the horror in Sudan. And of course, I don't need to remind you that it must not ignore the horror in Gaza. The genocidal destruction taking place in both places must now have our full attention. And as it relates to Gaza, yes, there must be a release of the hostages taken on October 7th. But we have now gone to a point where all of our human sensibilities are offended by the continuous and disproportionate attacks on the Palestinian people and the failure to allow access by the international community to the survivors for the provision of humanitarian aid. The survivors are entitled, my friends, to use the words of Bob Marley. How can you be sitting there telling me that you care, when every time I look around, the people suffer in the suffering in every way, in everywhere? My friends, it calls to mind the Roman historian Tacitus, who quoted a Scottish chieftain fighting against the military might of the Roman Empire. And I mention only the last two sentences. They plunder, they butcher, they ravish, they make it desert and call it peace. They make it desert and they call it peace. The real tragedy of war is that these children, when they become grandparents, will still be answering the innocent questions posed by their grandchildren 70, 80 years from now as to how they lost their limbs. Granny, how did you lose your leg? And when they answer, we run the risk that the violence and hate will be perpetuated for another 2 to 3 generations. This is not why we have come together. This is not good. And Madam President, it is happening under our watch. We can and we must do better to secure the peace across the world in the name of the children. And let me say that at the very least, the international community must immediately find the funding to support the children of Gaza and the children of Sudan for the next 3 months. UNICEF has said that in Gaza it is $66 million that is needed for the next 3 months. And in Sudan it is $200 million. The money is mostly nutrition related, to reverse or to mitigate famine for children, and to provide water and sanitation and health interventions. And we should note that there have been multiple disease outbreaks, including cholera. So, Madam President, to be very clear as I move on, a lasting peace can never be achieved through violence, not continued bombing. It can only be achieved through justice as our guide and dialogue, talking. And lest we forget, where others are seeking to build the peace and to preserve humanity in Gaza, as we saw, the international community must not condone the bombing of those states who look to facilitate peace. It is a red line that we must never cross. As I close today, I leave you with an image that has stayed with me for the last week of a young Palestinian girl of 6 or 7 years old walking in the midst of the rubble in Gaza. Her eyes were hollow and full of despair. It was clear that she was in great pain, but she carried her sister on her shoulders, both shoulders, clearly recognizing that it was she who would have to carry the burden of taking them to safety. My friends, this is the ultimate picture for me of hope and resilience. Let us be inspired that even in the face of the greatest adversity and challenges that the world faces, that we too can rise. For if a 6-year-old can push past the pain, all the physical and emotional pain, and still find hope that there's a better moment ahead of her, then we as leaders and members of the global community have a duty to summon that spirit. The world needs it now more than ever. It is not beyond us to forge a better world that is fair and just. 80 years ago, it was just a few countries that summon that will. Today, those of us who were denied the right to be heard then must now be the core responders to this critical clarion call. I leave you inspired by the words of my own anthem as I think about the world. Inspired, I say, upwards and onwards we shall go, inspired, exulting, free, and greater will our world grow in strength and unity. If a 6-year-old child can summon the will against all that she faced, then we, with much, much, much more, and with a commitment and an obligation to many, 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 many more, must summon that will. I thank you.